Hello, everyone, and welcome to our NCJW webinar. My name is Sharon Johnson, and I'm the proud president of NCJW's South Cook section in Illinois. For those of you new to National Council of Jewish Women, we are a 125-year-old organization that works through legislative advocacy to protect and advance the rights of women, children, and families. As you may know, NCJW has launched a webinar series to give our advocates across the country tools to stay connected to NCJW, reframe our work, and advance the Jewish values that drive our work. Today's conversation will be recorded, posted online, and shared widely for those who cannot attend in person. Before I introduce our speakers and the webinar, I wanted to share that our hearts go out to the family of George Floyd and the families and communities of Ahmaud Arbery, Sean Reed, and Breonna Taylor. NCJW reaffirms our commitment to stand with Black Americans as we call for an end to systemic racism. We hope you've seen NCJW's joint press statement with NCJW Minnesota expressing both our outrage and vision for a more just America. So many urgent issues are unfolding in this very moment all around us, and with protests continuing in response to police violence, Wear Orange Day coming up this Friday, and all weekend to end gun violence, and the pandemic continuing all around us, it is still important to remember another vulnerable community that is impacted by all of this, the domestic violence survivors. The conversation we're about to hear will highlight the dangerous intersection between domestic and sexual violence and firearms, and what you can do to help those at risk right now. Here are some quick housekeeping notes. Today's conversation is 30 minutes, unlike our other webinars. You'll notice everyone's mics are muted and cameras are turned off. This is intentional to keep the focus on our speakers today. You can reach out to Leah Singman at action@ncjw.org or write in the chat if you are experiencing ongoing technical issues, but please note our limited capacity to address issues while the webinar is running. Gentle reminder that we are recording the webinar and will upload it to our website. And we are offering a live caption feature on all of our webinars. You can access this feature by clicking on Caption at the bottom of your screen. With that, it is now my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Representative Robin Kelly, Democrat from Illinois. Since being elected to serve the 2nd Congressional District in 2013, Robin has worked to expand economic opportunity, community wellness, and public safety across the state, championing numerous initiatives to generate job growth, reduce health disparities, and end gun violence. A staunch champion of common sense gun reforms and responsible community policy, Representative Kelly is a co-chair of the Congressional Gun Violence Prevention Task Force and is the author of the 2014 Kelly Report on Gun Violence in America, the first ever congressional analysis of the nation's gun violence epidemic that offers a blueprint for ending the crisis. Wow. I'll say that again, wow. As one of our South Cook, Illinois Congresswomen, we are so proud to have Congresswoman Kelly's voice speak for us in Congress. During Washington Institute, our South Cook section had the honor of visiting her offices and speaking with her staff. It was a great visit, and we were really impressed with her dedication and fearless championship of our individual rights and freedoms. Our other speaker is Sheila Katz. She's the CEO of the National Council of Jewish Women. Previously, Sheila was Hillel International's Vice President for Student Engagement and Leadership. In 2014, Sheila was appointed by the White House to committees advising President Obama on higher education and women's rights. She is a strong advocate for inclusion and equality and has served on the board of the Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse and as a rape crisis counselor. Sheila was named as one of 2019's 50 most influential Jews in the United States by The Forward. As many of you know, Sheila is an excellent speaker. She visited South Cook Section last December for our annual holiday dinner and board meeting. She inspired all of us to go forth and make our mark. She has been intrepid in her activities and a great role model for our membership. Sheila.
Visit Chicago sometime in the near future. Congresswoman, I believe you're on, so we'll try to get your video up in a moment, but I'll just say thank you, Sharon. I'm so honored to be here with all of you on Zoom and Facebook Live and to be joined by Congresswoman Kelly. Hi there, good to see you. And as you heard, Congresswoman Kelly is a leader in the House of Representatives and a true champion for gun violence prevention. So again, thank you so much for being here with the National Council of Jewish Women today. We have lots of friends and supporters who love you, who are here, including Sharon and so many of the South Cook section members who are in your district who are watching from home, which is great. And so I'll just say as we get started, as you know, Congresswoman, and some of you on the call may or may not know, as far back as the 60s, NCJW is on record supporting gun safety measures. And our work continues today to ensure background checks on gun sales, closing the partner loophole that allows stalkers and people with domestic violence convictions to have guns, bans on assault weapons, and so much more, because we know that where there is a gun, it makes it 5 times more likely that domestic violence will turn deadly. And in 2015 alone, we lost nearly 3,000 children and teenagers in this country to gun violence. But before we dive in, I want to acknowledge the pain so many people on this call are feeling right now around the state of our country and systemic racism that has led to the murder of Black people, including in broad daylight recently. And it really is a challenging time, especially for people of color. So Congresswoman Kelly, if you're comfortable sharing, I just want to start off and ask, how are you doing today? What do you make of all of this, of what's happening in our country right now? And how are your constituents doing?
Well, first of all, I want to say hello to everybody and thank you so much for inviting me, and hello to all my constituents. And I have to give a shout out to Judy Moore, even though she's in Phoenix now. She's saying hi to me. And yes, I did go to NIU and Bradley, so I am a Bradley Brave, whoever wrote that. But, you know, I go from being teary to being angry to being frustrated. You know, it's very heartbreaking. And to see that what happened to Mr. Floyd just played over and over and over. But just like with COVID and what's happening, you know, with the deaths, it's shocking, but not surprising, because we've been dealing with this, you know, for such a long time. And what I'm hoping that the light is shining bright now, but the light will dim. And I just hope that we remain committed to closing some of these gaps, the social determinants of health, you know, the over-policing in African-American communities. And, you know, I've worked 3 years on maternal mortality. It happens to all women, but, you know, 3 to 4 times as much with Black women. So there's been many, many things, and we're sick of it, frankly. And I was telling somebody, someone that's on this call actually, that I just feel like screaming that, you know, we're human beings. We're not, I don't even want to say we're not animals, because people get offended when animals are mistreated, you know, so, but we're not second-class citizens. We've contributed to this country just as much as everyone else. So I'm hoping this is a moment, and that the moment turns into a movement, and the country will progress. You know, I'm an optimist, so I'm hoping for good things.
Oh, good. Well, I hope everyone on this call soaks up the optimism. We all need it right now.
And
Thank you.
We need allies. That's the big thing. You know, we need allies. So I appreciate your words.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so important. And we're really working to make sure we center all of our response right now around people of color, and that especially for white people and white Jews on this call, we've been really working hard to do our part to hold up the mirror to ourselves, examine what role we play, and to work hard to be better allies all the time. It takes work, and we're committed to that. So, so
Well,
thank
I've
you.
heard from a lot of my Jewish friends, by the way, so that have been
That's
concerned
great.
about me.
Good. We care about you. So as we transition to some of the things that, we wanted to talk to you about today, we know these protests are going around
Mhm.
right now. And it can be easy to forget, but we're still in the midst of a global health pandemic, which is
Right.
forcing people to isolate at home. And we know that that means that many people who experience domestic violence are being forced to shelter in place with their abuser. So in this moment that we have in the crazy world we live in, they're unsafe outside and they're unsafe inside, which is a bit daunting to think about. So we wanted to know what you can tell us about domestic violence in the midst of COVID-19. Is it on the rise? And how does gun violence or access to guns impact survivors?
Well, interestingly enough, my stepdaughter is a 911 operator, and she was telling me when COVID started how her first call was about domestic violence and how they're definitely on the rise. And I just spoke with her today, and she told me that they are 65,000 calls over the normal. Not all domestic violence, but so many people are calling in. So they're taking away all their vacations, everything. And this is in the city of Chicago. So as you know, guns are intimately involved with domestic violence. That's how, over half of the women that are murdered lose their lives because of guns. That's why I also found it very interesting that gun stores were allowed to stay open like they were essential, during this time. Gun stores and liquor stores, a good combination, or allowed to stay open because it's a deadly combination. And you're right that you're not calling you're stuck inside. You can't, you're socially distancing. And I've heard stories when people have called like shelters or different places for help, they actually meet the person outside and socially distance. But then, you may not be able to go to a shelter because of this issue. So it is very, very difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, and we don't always hear about it because you don't hear people talk about experiencing domestic violence because it can be unsafe in that moment. And so it's the perfect storm of it getting overlooked and people forgotten about. So
Right.
It's so helpful that you're sharing those numbers. It is overwhelming, but it's just a reminder that we all have work to do to make sure we are being advocates for everybody who's vulnerable right now, including survivors of violence.
And even if you're different groups across the country can do a little homework and find out, a list of where shelters are or where other resources are that people could possibly call, that would be great.
Yeah, so here, first call to action, everybody find out where your local shelter is, which isn't always published for safety reasons, but I know many NCJW sections donate essential items to domestic violence shelters or will volunteer as tutors, especially when children are there. And so that's a great thing to check in and see what people need to be able to.
Well, and also push the hotlines,
Yep.
and that's a good resource also.
Yeah. So I guess tying in what you started with and where we just went to, we know there's an influx of calls right now to domestic violence hotlines, but we also know that many survivors have this exacerbated fear because their abusive partner has access to a gun. And for many, as we think about this, people of color, trans people, and undocumented individuals, as we've seen play out in the news lately, they don't want to call the police out of fear from them as well. And so I'm curious what folks here, we started sharing, they can call, the shelters, but what can people do about the fact, it just feels so overwhelming that people in domestic violence situations don't really have a way out, and there's so many barriers against them over and over again. So how can we help people in situations of domestic violence? And can you share just a little bit about how you're centering survivors in your activism and policy work?
Well, one thing besides shelters, maybe not all, but some houses of worship might be a place that people can call. I know in my district, a lot of when you talk about immigrants or people that aren't citizens yet, the houses of worship have been great sanctuaries for many, many people. So that, might be depending. I know it depends on the particular house of worship, but that might be, or even some of the social service agencies might be, good places to call also. But also the other thing is, we had the Violence Against Women's Act that we need you guys to call and make sure that gets passed. That's the other thing that would help. There's legislation out there. Like I have legislation that deals with keeping guns from high-risk individuals, but we have to get it passed. There's pieces of legislation, but they have to be passed. And that's how I try to, help my constituents, not only mine, but if it's law, people, women across the nation, to get these laws in place that we've been so slow to get passed. Quite frankly, it's been very difficult. If you live in a red state, we really need your help in contacting your member of Congress or your senator.
Yeah, so everybody make phone calls around legislation. We can send, after this call, we'll also send out some resources for folks who want to make those calls. And speaking of legislation, the House passed the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization bill with important firearms provisions. And we know that Congress is also working on the HEROES Act to support essential workers and at-risk communities during this pandemic. I'm curious what other legislation you mentioned one already, but what other legislation should folks on this call have on their radars and be supporting right now?
Well, we did pass the HEROES Act. We're waiting for the Senate to take it up. So we know it's not going to look exactly like we sent it over, but if they can keep most of the things in that really do help our heroes, our first responders, nurses, frontline workers, postal workers, of course, police, fire, EMT. We need the pressure put on, and there also, and then it covers like a 75 more billion in testing. So all very, and a lot of other things too, all very, very important. Right now, what we're really starting to concentrate on are all the appropriations bills, and so that government is funded and we get the right things to the right people. And then the other thing we're concentrating on, what we're in now is an emergency phase, but we are going to move to recovery. So we're working on legislation that deals with, we're calling it infrastructure. And when people think about that, they think about roads and bridges, but it's also about healthcare infrastructure, mental health. There's mental health bills in the hopper, very, very important, and things like broadband, because this crisis has pointed out that people don't have, they can't get online, they can't do their homework, they don't have the tools, and it's really, that's been a bright light shown also how many people don't really have access like we think they do. But again, as far as legislation, violence against women, and if it's in the Senate, Dianne Feinstein has a really, really good bill that we hope people can get behind. We have a bill that deals with wearing orange, and which was started by young activists who were friends of Hadiya Pendleton. So Senator Durbin and myself have a bill that recognizes, really we want to recognize June as, Gun Violence Prevention Month. So we have, that bill, and it's just amazing that it's so hard to get, some of these things passed. But those are two things that really, really, really stand out.
Yeah. And NCJW helped write the Feinstein bill, so that's exciting that you're saying it's great. We're happy to be a part of that. And you mentioned wear orange, and I can't help but notice that both of us are sporting our orange, different shades of orange.
Yeah.
And that is, it's this Friday, right? June 5th?
Yeah, I wear it on June 2nd because today is Hadiya Pendleton's birthday, and she would have been 23 years old today. So, and orange was her favorite color. So I wear it on June 2nd, but I will have my orange T-shirt on Friday, because people have a tendency to forget when other things are going on, and this is so important. Over the past weekend in Chicago, over 80 people were shot and 19 people died. So this issue, despite COVID, has not gone away. And if anything, like you said, from people being stuck in their house, worried about their finances, stressed out, that's why, we're seeing the rise in domestic violence and the rise in phone calls to the 911 centers. The other scary thing with kids not being in school, the calls for child abuse have gone down because the teachers aren't there to report it. So that's quite scary, who knows what those numbers really are.
Yeah, yeah. It's even in domestic violence, it often says that people don't have a full account of what those numbers actually are. Yeah.
The other thing is we still need help in getting the background bills passed. We passed them in the House, but it's been over a year, but Mitch McConnell has not taken those bills up. So the background check bill and the bill we like to call closing the Charleston loophole, where if after 3 days there's not a definitive, yes, you can buy this gun, that they cannot sell the gun, which happened in the case in Charleston and Mother Emanuel Church. So we need the pressure still put on, for those bills also.
Yeah. What I appreciate about the sadness in all of this is that there's really tangible actions for people to take that are creative, and with people sitting at home for the most part, or if they're on a commute to work, if they're essential workers, everybody can pick up the phone and make a phone call and send an email. And so I promise everyone on this call will send you exactly what to say and where to call. Congresswoman Kelly, you'll be getting lots of calls in your office.
You don't have to call me. I'll vote the right way.
There you go.
I already voted.
That's good. That's good.
The one thing that that I also wanted to bring up, I always say nothing stops a bullet like an opportunity. So whatever people can do to mentor young people or give someone a chance to be an intern or a volunteer, in your organization, bring someone along. That really makes a difference too. I can't tell you how many young people that I met that said if it wasn't for that, then they would have been, not doing as well as they are if someone did not, give them a chance. So, that's really important too, just to reach out to young people.
Yeah, and everyone here is so involved in their community. It's a great call to action. I guess just as we're thinking about all these issues and the intersection, I just want to name that over the past several years, we have seen more and more advocates get involved with gun violence prevention work. I think Sandy Hook and Parklands in particular were big reasons for that. And then after Parklands, I remember it was teens of color in Chicago who then shared very publicly that they felt left out of the conversation, not cared for when they were experiencing gun violence at a disproportionate rate. And so I'm curious if you were involved with any of these conversations with these teen gun violence survivors, and what advice you have particularly for white people on engaging the topic of gun violence prevention, as we know this also intersects with race.
I know a lot of those young people very well. And there's a group, Good Kids Mad City, that started in Chicago and Baltimore. And what they feel is that it wasn't until what happened in Parkland happened, and when more so white kids, it happened to them, and then they spoke out, then people listened to them. But the very Black kids have been saying the same thing for a long time, and nobody really listened. To the credit of the Parkland community, they invited the Black kids from Chicago, to Parkland, and then Parkland came up to Chicago. So you met a lot of them at Father Mike Flager's church, and then they were very inclusive, so that was great because the kids got it when some of the adults, did not get it. But I will also give the folks from Sandy Hook a shout out, because they said they realized when something happened in Hartford, Connecticut, all the, I think it was Black kids that died, and it wasn't the same attention. And they realized they needed to use the light on them to spread the light on other people that were suffering more. So, and when I asked one of the Parkland kids, I said, what did you think about Chicago before this happened to you and what was happening? He said, I didn't think about it. And he said, but now I realize what happened to us was a moment. What they deal with this every day. I was choked up myself, listening to them. And then, all the marches for our lives that happened all over and those kind of things. But we have got to work together. There's not one, one person alone, that can solve this. And, I get demonized by the gun people because they think I want to take their gun away. Well, I grew up with guns around me. I'm from New York City. My uncles were cops. My grandfather was a hunter and all of that. It's not that I don't want a gun, but I'm not against guns. If you have your gun legally and you're not trying to hurt yourself or anyone else, then have your gun. I don't think, you need military style guns and that kind of thing, but they try to put everyone in one bucket, like they want to take our guns. And, that's not true. And people, it's so divisive, I guess. And the president hasn't helped either, in this conversation. So, but yeah, the kids have been doing a great job, and they're still keeping it up. I'm still in contact with them. I'm still doing things with them, the kids in the city and kids from March for Our Lives.
Well, I feel like what a message to end on, that we're all in this together, and there's a lot of work for us to do. And so we're so grateful, Congresswoman Kelly, for you to join us today,
You're welcome.
to share what you're seeing on the ground, and to give us great advice about how we can mobilize and how we can act to make things better and safer for people. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for including me. I appreciate it. And thanks for all the work you guys do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Wonderful. So for everyone who's still on the call, I'll just share a few action items. We heard a lot already, but I want to say thank you for joining today. Remember to wear orange on June 5th and get involved with #WearOrange online. And we hope also that you'll join the NCJW delegation at the Poor People's Campaign coming up for their virtual summer mobilization on June 20th. We'll post the link in the chat, but you'll also get it in a follow-up email. Use this link because then we'll know you're there and we can all get together virtually. We hope you'll send a letter to your senators urging the need to include a lot of these issues in the next COVID package, and donate essential items to the local domestic violence shelter, and call them the way that we learned from Congresswoman Kelly to learn how you could be helpful. And then, of course, we hope you get educated and involved in anti-racism efforts. There's an email going out from NCJW this week with ideas of what you can be doing on your own and with other people. And if we've missed something, you can always email us at action@ncjw.org, or if you don't get our emails, you can email us there and we'll get you on the list. And so with that, I just want to thank Congresswoman Kelly again, and the South Cook section, and Sharon, and all the amazing advocates there for joining in today's critical conversation. It really, I think we're leaving realizing that all of our issues intersect with each other all the time, and we always have to be noticing where they play a role together and doing our part to lift up great examples of advocacy and to continue to call our members of Congress, because they hear us and they vote accordingly. So thank you again, everyone. It was good to see those of you I could see over chat. And oh, I think there might be, we have another webinar coming up, but I can't tell you the date because it's going to happen whenever the response to June Medical Services versus Russo, the case happening in the Supreme Court about abortion access. Whenever that's decided, that's when we're going to have the webinar, but you can register for it already, and we're doing that with Catholics for Choice, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, Women of Reform Judaism, and the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. So if you sign up to register for that, you'll get the alert when it's time. So with that, good to see everyone. Be safe. Have a good afternoon and evening. Thanks for joining us.